listening to us via the free, new and improved iHeartRadio app and are at the Big Ten tournament and happen to run into Tim Connelly, will you tap him politely on the shoulder and say, the guys from Bumper to Bumper, Barrero and Guardsy, are trying to reach you for what was supposed to be a 5 o'clock on-air session? So we are attempting to find Mr. Connelly, who I think I know he landed there because he sent me some St. Paddy's Day photos from the airport. Main nice. Area, there were some St. Paddy's Day events going on.
The Indy airport.
So I know he's there.
Magical.
It's extremely magical. It's one of the best. And now it's in between sessions for the Big Ten tournament. They're preparing for the evening sessions with Wisconsin and Michigan State already having won their games. So we hopefully will get him. In fact, I think that might be him calling the hotline as we speak. Wolves will be on the Fan tonight on the flagship FM 100.3 The Fan, taking on the Orlando Magic. So you can hear that game on the Fan. You can always hear all Wolves games on the highly coveted Timberwolves channel, where anytime, day or night, there's something Wolves related on the Timberwolves channel, including like vintage interviews, more recent interviews, maybe even a couple of Conley interviews from the past, although it would have to be pretty ancient because we haven't had Conley on in a while. Oh, is that him? Did he call in? Hi, stranger.
How's it going, man?
We're doing all right. Funny, all of a sudden you're available to us. It's unbelievable. What? Is this just a coincidence? The team is recovering nicely, and now you're with us again.
Well, I remember we had the new rule. I can't talk to you unless we have a 6-game winning streak.
Well, okay. Well, we'll remember that. You, by the way, you're doing your due diligence evaluating college basketball talent. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been on the road all week, different conference tournaments. It's probably my favorite time of the year to see all these games. It's been a blast.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I want to spend more time on your team and what you see and what you like. But when you go in this sort of setting, like a conference tournament, where I feel like it's kind of crazed and busy, and I don't. Where do they put scouts for this? Are you in a good spot? Are you like in the upper deck, or how do you go about trying to get what you do?
They used to be great. They used to give us great seats.
Yeah.
And now they charge us an arm and a leg. So generally, I just buy single game tickets. I go on an app, or
is that right?
Scout tickets outside.
Interesting. And then you're just in a race. It's not like you're at a table with other scouts. You just get a seat, a ticket.
Yep.
Wow. Does anybody recognize you?
No. I'm a pretty normal looking guy. I look like every other guy at the SEC tournament or the Big Ten.
And you love that, don't you? You absolutely. I think you love your anonymity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, certainly don't enjoy any added attention. But again, when you're a very average, probably under average,
calm down.
Middle-aged guy, it's pretty easy to blend during conference tournament time.
Do you think you would stand out a little bit more if you showed up at one of these conference tournaments in the Rob Pelinka jacket?
Yeah, I think, certainly depending on your attire, you can maybe pop a bit more. That's probably a fair scout.
We've gotten so much mileage out of that jacket. It's just too good. It's such a great story. Real quick, by the way, because we have not talked on air in a while. So the assumption is that talent people, personnel people, general managers, like yourself, were like stunned beyond belief that a player of Luka's ability, particularly at his age, even if there's some warts, because everybody's got them, ended up being available. Were you gobsmacked that a player of that accomplishment was moved?
Yes. I think the whole league was surprised. Just kind of unprecedented to see a guy who's accomplished that much at his age, who was happy where he was. So I was as surprised as everyone else.
It was widely reported that the Lakers actually, or the Mavericks actually, talked to two teams, not one. That it wasn't just the Lakers. And as you know, probably, I'm sure you've seen the reports, you're reported to be the other team. Can you confirm that?
We never talked about trading for Luka. So I mean, you have 18 million conversations in the build up to the trade deadline, but we never had a discussion specific to Luka.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Let's get to your team. So I think you'll agree it's kind of been a meandering season, not a bad season, but not, probably what you were hoping for. It seemed like there were a lot of stops and starts. Now it looks like you're starting again, and it looks like maybe you're building something that for the first time feels like it's sustainable. What do you see? What do you think has changed in your mind to give people that impression? And I assume you that impression as well. You tell me.
Well, I think our Achilles heel has been our inability to close games. Our clutch numbers this year, are bottom of the league. So it's hard to win consistently when you can't close. So if you look across the board, we have a lot of positive metrics, but ultimately, the last 2 minutes, we've had a hard time executing and closing games. I think what's happened the last couple of months, we've been played pretty good to really good ball. There's increased continuity. We made a big trade just prior to the start of the season, so we expect it to be a little clunky. I think Finchie's done an amazing job kind of uncovering some different players, some skill sets that can augment and complement, the Ants and the Jadens of those guys. And I think sometimes it's overlooked. We're still a relatively young team. Anthony's 23, Jaden's 24. So they're when you're that reliant on players that young, sometimes there's going to kind of be these manic moments. So we like what we're playing right now. Certainly, we'd hope we'd be in a different position when the season started than where we are presently. But we're stringing together some pretty good basketball. It's been several months now. I think if we play kind of the right way, and most nights we feel like if we don't win, we're right there. And hopefully we can continue to build off that and kind of make one more push as we enter the postseason.
Is some of this, when I watch you guys play, and when you were kind of, like I said, struggling, win 2, lose 3, nothing could get sustained. I felt, especially when the injuries cropped in or kicked in too, I felt like there was such a burden on Edwards to do so much, especially you're talking about the end of games, that what has changed a little bit is he's getting more help, and that the best thing you can do, even for a guy as talented as him, is take, in various ways, very sophisticated ways, as in the case of the head coach, some of the burden away from him so that he doesn't have to literally make every decision the way it seemed like he did before. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think when you're as talented as Anthony and he's so competitive, he really embraces that responsibility. But it would be unfair for us to expect him to do everything. And the more faith and trust he has in his teammates, he's such a positive teammate, I think the more they're going to get comfortable in those situations. And we've seen guys really step up in crunch time the last couple of months. So it's also, I think, when you go from star to superstar, certainly Anthony has become a superstar with the team success and USA basketball. There's a level of scrutiny and kind of a level of opponent commitment that there's very few peer guys in the league who kind of understand what he's going through. So I think it's been really neat for him to kind of grow and understand how to combat some of these more aggressive defenses, how he can trust the teammates, how he can trust Finchie and the staff. And I think he keeps getting better and better. I
think, for me, the key to this stretch has been Randall, because I believe that the fit, if I'm being honest, as a guy who endorsed the move when you made it, I think it did feel clunky. I felt like it just didn't seem comfortable. I didn't feel that you had the Ubuntu, that you had the good feelings that you had a year ago. He gets hurt, and he comes back, I think, a different player. I believe the stuff that I always felt he could help you with the most, which was basically point forward stuff. Don't even worry about your scoring. Your scoring is going to come because you're a natural scorer. Just make other people better. Just, make your decisions quicker. Get the ball in your hands, out of your hands as quickly as possible. I think he's playing with a different commitment. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's always challenging, both for the player and the team, a guy as accomplished as Julius. We knew it wasn't going to be a seamless integration, but his playmaking is elite. And the more, I think, he creates easy opportunities for our guys, I think our guys are going to make shots. So I think what he's done a wonderful job is starting to get a real sense of where his teammates want the ball, how can he be most effective. And to your point, he's making quick, decisive reads. We're playing with more pace. And then he's going to score the ball. I mean, I think scoring for him is kind of relatively easy and ingrained in who he is. But his playmaking, his multiple efforts on the defensive end, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, it would be disingenuous to say that we've been rolling all year, but the last couple of months, I feel like we played a pretty fun, sustainable brand of basketball, and I think our guys have a real belief right now that we got a pretty good chance to make some noise.
To me, it's an encouraging sign, too, because let's face it, I mean, players hear stuff. They may not constantly listen to media, but there were times, and we've talked about this, Guardsy and I, on the air. I think there were actually times where, when you guys were struggling, that Randall got blamed for too much. It was almost like he became the easy guy to blame, right? The guy in the cat trade, and the ball's getting sticky with him, and it's always his fault. And some stuff had nothing to do with him. Some did. But players in his position, sometimes they can pout over that, or they can feel sorry for themselves about becoming the center of that negativity. And it looks to me like he's done the opposite of that. Like I said, where he almost looks like he's playing a liberated game, where he even said, one of the comments he said when he came back was what he studied when he was gone was just pace. Watching the way the team played without him and just trying to establish a certain pace. And maybe a little bit, again, everything moving faster. So to me, that's to his credit, because you've been around this league a long time, and players, they can start feeling sorry for themselves when they feel like they're unfairly being blamed for whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we traded a great player and a great guy. So certainly there's going to be inevitable comparisons. But Julius is a great, great guy. And we really challenged him to have more fun out there. Sometimes you look out there and he's brooding, and he's the furthest thing from a brooding personality. He's a wonderful guy, A-plus family guy, and has fun. So we really told him, let's have fun. Get out. It's okay to smile out there. It's okay to not worry about mistakes. So I think it's a huge testament to his willingness to adjust, and then obviously Finch and the staff are as good as anybody in the world. And they've done a great job getting to know this roster and putting them in position to succeed.
Tim Connelly joining us on The Fan. Ben Goessling will join us at the bottom of the 5 o'clock hour as well. Internally within the team, you, the head coach, etc., how much of an emphasis are you guys putting on getting out of the play-in? Is that a vital thing at this point for you guys? Is that, okay, yeah, you want to, but we'll do what we have to do? Or how big of an emphasis are you guys organizationally putting on that?
I think we just want to continue to play good basketball. Look, if we win every game and Golden State wins every game and we miss out by a game, then so be it. We'll be excited to have that 10-7 matchup. We blew a bunch of games early. There's no looking back. And if you looked above and behind us, more so above, it's almost unprecedented, the win rate we're seeing teams play right now in March. So we can't control that. We're not going to see these guys anymore. We're pretty much done with the Western Conference playoff team. That we have Memphis and Denver left. A bunch of those teams are going to play each other. But we're pretty convicted and pretty confident if we play up to our high standards, we'd like our chances against anybody. Optimally, certainly the goal when the season started was to be a home court playoff team. That's what we thought we could be. And that was what we really challenged ourselves initially. Can we get there? I don't know. There's only X amount of games left, but if we continue to play really good basketball, all the metrics, all the analytics have said that for the last 2-3 months we're a very good basketball team. Net differentials, we're top 10 in offense and defense. These really positive factors, but the reality is our record is not where it was last year, and we have a different reality. So we just want to get in the postseason and see where we stand.
Anthony Edwards, of course, has been battling the technical foul issue this year. It cost you guys a game probably in Utah when he hit the magic number. I don't think he's had a single technical since. So tell me what you guys have tried to do to get him over this hurdle, for all the obvious reasons, given how important he is to this team and where he is. Do you think he's conquered that issue, or is it a little premature to say he's finally figured that part of it out?
Well, it shouldn't be an issue. It wasn't an issue last year, and we also don't want to be a team that complains. We think it's weak, and if we expect these referees to be perfect, we're certainly not a perfect team, so I think it's an unfair expectation. I think the refs do a great job. Anthony gets a free throw line a ton of times. I do think at times when you're that big and strong, you're on the wrong side of the whistle because I think you can tape the contact with some of the guys who can most acutely game the whistle, tend to get the highest free throw rates. But we think the worst part about his issues with the technical is he's a really nice guy who enjoys communication and enjoys relationships. So we've challenged him for several years. Talk to these guys and these ladies and show them respect. Don't show them up. So it's just not who he is. We think it's a very low hanging fruit. It's something that he's aware of. It's something that he was really disappointed when he let the team down. He missed that game in Utah. We lost the game in a one possession. But again, organizationally, we don't want to be a team that's out there always whining. It's not who we are. It's not who we want to be.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it sounds. I mean, I'm sure you guys have had conversations about that. I know Finchie though, because there have been times where Finchie has lately gotten into that more about the officiating, and that's always what's interesting for me to calibrate is how often then you run the risk of players then picking up the cue. Okay, my coach is doing it, so I can do it. I mean, back in the Phil Jackson days, he did it a lot. Right? You know this. He played that game a lot in trying to send messages. But how does the coach thread the needle in saying, okay, that's part of what I got to do, but you stay out of that as a player because if you get involved in that, we actually do run the risk that we're going to lose you?
Yeah, I think Finch does a great job, and our players understand. Let him do the communicating and talking. Let him, if we feel especially like we're on the wrong end of a whistle, I mean, he's going to fight for our guys. But again, I think the refs do a great job all in all. I think their job is just about impossible. And it's not a fun way to sit there and constantly point out when others aren't perfect. So across all levels of our team, we think we're on the wrong end of it. We'll loudly communicate and we'll tell the league why we think that, but we don't want to be a constant. Oftentimes the more aggressive who gets a better whistle. We think we're a team that kind of thrives off aggression on both ends. So the more they allow us to play, the better. So we certainly don't want to be the team that's looking for every ticky-tack call out there. You
guys went through a stretch. You're now relatively healthy, obviously, when you dealt with a series of injuries, at which point Finchie had no choice but to go deeper into the roster. And what we seem to find out is there's some talent there. And so as the guy who's involved in those acquisitions, how gratifying was that? And what do you think you now know about your young bench that you perhaps didn't know that might still be helpful the rest of the season? And I like to think still in the playoffs. I still think the notion that, well, you got to shorten everything in the playoffs. I don't agree. If you have depth that can be used, to me, that's an advantage you could use against a team like Denver, for example, even in the postseason. So how do you feel about the kids, their development, and can they end up continuing to contribute even when things get tighter?
Yeah, I think what's been really great is there's, some kind of proof of concept. We think these guys are good. We think they're talented. All of our young guys have a really good approach, both with work ethic, with kind of commitment to be pros. But you never know till they play. I think just about everyone on our roster has shown flashes where they've been really impactful to winning. And I think the hardest thing when you start to ingratiate young players on your roster is, do they know how to win? And I think we have a bunch of young guys on our team that kind of appreciate that really delicate line between playing winning basketball and just playing basketball. That's probably the most exciting part.
I will tell you too that one of the things I've enjoyed about during that stretch again about Terrence Shannon was just the old, I'm going north-south. I might end up taking a charging call. I might, whatever, but I'm going. I'm going downhill. I'm going to the basket. And I think that also was helpful to your team. The idea that it was almost like he didn't know any better than to do it, and he obviously has some ability to do it. But I love that element of his game.
Yeah, he only plays one way. I mean, it's when I go in the Big Ten tournament right now.
Uh-oh. Put
Bad cell service in Indy.
Connelly. What sounded to me like he went into some room,
Yeah.
so maybe that's what did it. He had to, maybe
about 10 minutes from now.
Maybe he had to go to the restroom or something. It's possible. We'll see if we can get him back for another quickie. Tim Connelly, our guest. We're going to have Ben Goessling at the bottom of the hour. He is he being Connelly is in Indianapolis scouting. That's part of what he does. And in this case, it's Big Ten tournament game number 3 of the day, and he is back. Okay, let's see if we can get him.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, no problem. No problem.
With TJ, it's funny, walking to the Big Ten tournament last year at Target Center, he kind of took over that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Tournament. And his, guys that are usually played that downhill generally don't have his size.
Mm-hmm.
And Finchie has a great, a great lineup. He has repeatable offensive skills. You kind of know what he's doing. I think you'll see as he get more and more comfortable too. We think he can be a special defender. He's tough. He's physical. He's unafraid of challenges. And I think also he's a pretty good playmaker.
Yeah.
We think, and he plays a brand of basketball that certainly translates to any game, any competition. So we're super lucky to have him. It's been, everyone has injuries, but the silver lining is seeing these guys thrust into roles, and all of them have had moments where they've been super impressive.
Yeah, it's a nice element for sure, and who knows where it'll go. Last question, I hope you can answer honestly, but I'm afraid you may try to sort of avoid. How close did you come before the trade deadline to making a significant deal?
I don't think we were that close. I mean, the trade deadline is 99.5% posturing and lies, and then 0.4% you get a situation where it's something actionable.
Yeah,
we were never on the 1 yard line with anything. We talked about 2019. We talked around about countless concepts, but we weren't in the red zone with anything.
Not with Phoenix?
No, we talked to every team.
Okay, I knew
there was no press conference ensuing. We weren't that far down the line with any trade we talked about.
Is it true? Can you confirm that life in the second apron, though, does make whatever you can potentially envision or think about exponentially more difficult in your position?
It's been really hard, and I think the NBA, it's probably unintended, and I've shared this with them. If we're a second apron team and we're going to pay a big tax bill, it makes total sense. You don't want to be in a situation like Major League Baseball where the Yankees are going to spend $300 million more than the Orioles. But I don't think was intended, and I think maybe has to be looked at. It wasn't just the difficulty from our seat; it was across every team. Teams that were much different financial situation with us, they couldn't make trades because it triggered something else or triggered their inclusion in the apron. So I think that's why we saw, we saw obviously the very surprising Lakers trade, but our conversations, even relatively minor trade calls, became infinitely more complicated because of the triggering different aprons, not just from our team, but
the other teams. Interesting.
We're talking to us. Yeah, it was much. I don't think it's dollar for dollar over a certain apron. I don't know if that's good for transacting. And the off season in the NBA has become kind of like the hot stove. Like people love it. They love the rumors and love conversations.
Yeah, that's no doubt.
I think it's going to be really hard to transact if the rules are this detailed and they don't just impact the teams with the big budgets. They impact everybody.
Maybe you can answer this kind of trade question. Is it fair to say that you were unsettled enough by the stops and starts of the team that you were willing to consider something fairly significant if you could find something that you liked before the trade deadline?
I mean, you and I have become pretty good buddies. I'm always, as a staff, we are not risk averse, so we're always willing and open to do anything major, but it could help our team. And with the way we're playing, certainly if you're 20 games over 500, your mindset and discussions are different than we were a couple games over 500 around the trade deadline. So, I think that the team and the play and where we stand relative to the other Western Conference teams certainly impacts how you approach the deadline.
All right, just two last things. One, we talked briefly about Luka. Obviously, and you mentioned Golden State. You keep winning. Golden State keeps winning. and they make the Butler transaction, and he has been everything they could have hoped for, right? I mean, you know this. He's a great two-way player when he's in the mode where he's with a new team. How there's still in the back of my mind, though, a bad taste about what Butler represents. In fact, you know, we have Mike Conley on every 2 or 3 weeks, and he talked about this as a veteran, that he gets bothered by what he thinks the Butler approach with his previous team does for every player, even in the next CBA, that how owners might get more ornery about giving out the same kind of guaranteed money when you have a player manipulate things the way Buckets has tended to almost anywhere he's been. Do you think that approach, even though it's now looks great because he's with a new team and everybody loves him and he loves his new spot, does end up hurting everybody in the league a little bit? The notion that in the end, he got what he wanted. You know, he basically quit on his previous team and he gets what he wants. Does that hurt everybody in the league, do you think?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're all fans, right? I'm a huge, basically baseball fan or NFL fan, and the teams and the guys I like the most are really good teammates. Not perfect,
right?
But guys that, you know, it's corny and cheesy, but it's kind of like why we like sports. We're selfless and role accepting and have each other's back. And if it's solely about the individual, and again, it's a huge business, so at times you just got to be selfish. These guys have a finite amount of time to make a lot of money. I tell our guys all the time, if some team offers you something we can't do, we'll have a happy hour to say, hey, congrats, enjoy the next spot. So, but I do think it's bad for the NBA and, quite frankly, bad for professional sports if our greatest players can't kind of abide by those expectations. You know, I think it's why we like sports.
Last item is, it sounds like you're about to go into to see the Big Ten Game 3 of the day. Did you just Did you just jaywalk? I heard somebody honk at you. Did you just jaywalk? Get caught jaywalking?
I barely listen. I'm so locked in on this interview.
That's it. Fair enough. Thanks for the time. It's good to catch up. We'll try to stay in touch as we get closer into playoff season. Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. That is Tim Connelly, the president of basketball operations for your Minnesota Timberwolves. We apologize for a little bit of a sound issue, but I think we got through it pretty well, all things considered.
You think he was getting honked at?
I think he might have been.
Yeah.
I think he was jaywalking. He didn't want to admit it, yeah.
He missed the walk signal because
so
you were asking him about Durant.
Mesmerized, yeah. I knew it wasn't going to get anywhere with him. What's he going to say? But you have to at least try. All right, we got Ben Goessling coming up. We'll get we'll get his reaction to Vikings free agency in general, and dare we mention that other guy's name too? I think it's fair to say that as we prepare for Ben Goessling, that the president of basketball operations showed just the right amount of disdain for the Anthony Edwards obsession with being a victim, which is that's a good sign because it indicates to me that he's trying not to encourage the notion that he is the victim that he likes to think. He didn't deny because of his physicalness. This is what they used to say about Shaq as a center.
Yep.
So big and so strong that he doesn't get calls because he can handle it more than, dare I say, SGA.
Mm-hmm. He's been consistent with that on the whistle.
He's been very consistent, which I think is that's a good tone for the man in charge of the basketball operation to set. Let's talk football operations. Ben Goessling, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. We moved Ben around because he had some scheduling issues. We had Laval early. So we have not, I don't think we've been on the air together since the bulk of the Vikings free agency signings. And I said, you know, we tape a TV show called Enough Said every Friday, about noon. And I said during the show that this is not a good free agency period for the Vikings. It's an excellent one. Now, again, we all know there's no guarantees, but these are legitimate names who are well established as they've been very good National Football League players. We can quibble about ages and coming off of injury, but that in terms of addressing, especially, not just because they did get Harrison's back, they brought back their corner. They did several other things, but to me, most importantly, they emphasized in a year when they tell me in free agency some of the best acquisitions were at the line of scrimmage, offensive line and defensive line. That's where they spent the bulk of their money. that's where they settled on trying to get better. And to me, it's been a home run so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, they came in with a plan, and they have pretty much stuck to it. I think they realized that both lines of scrimmage, especially the offensive line, was something they could not avoid or something that they could not address on the cheap. It was, I've covered this team for 13 years, and the number of years where I've watched them try things out at a guard or kind of sign a second-level player or say, hey, we've got this guy we took in the 5th round and we think he's going to be somebody that develops next year. It's happened a lot, and they didn't do that here. They basically said, we need to fix this spot, and we need to spend some money on it. There's no way to get around that, and we're going to make peace with the fact that we have to do it. Will Fries, I thought, was somebody that made a lot of sense for them the whole time. A good pass protector, has more of that bully mentality, I think, that they need in the middle of that line. And then they say, let's go get his teammate. Let's go get Ryan Kelly, a guy that plays with a little bit more of an edge than Garrett Bradbury. This group, for as much as people talk about the Kevin O'Connell, Mr. Nice Guy stuff, you do see this time of year it come out when they say we need to upgrade. There doesn't seem to be a lot of hesitation about hurting people's feelings in the process. We've seen him, whether it's moving on from Ed Donatel to Brian Flores or getting rid of veterans, and both Kevin and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah are a part of this, but they've been fairly direct and fairly heartless is the wrong phrase, but not terribly worried about offending people by saying, okay, Garrett Bradbury, we love you, but we're moving on. So I think a lot of this has been they understood they needed to get better on both lines of scrimmage. They needed to play with more of the physicality that they've tried to have, but they just haven't had the personnel to make it happen. And they go spend the money to get that done with guys that, like you said, have some pedigree in the NFL.
Now, the bad news is the Cooper Kupp dream apparently has died. It appears that he is signing he wants to join Sam Darnold in Seattle with the Seahawks. I know a lot of people, including Seifert, thought there was a good chance that Kupp could land here. I don't know how you viewed that. Were we in it, do you think, or not so much, or what do you make of that announcement?
Well, I thought there was going to be a chance of it because Cooper Kupp has some pretty big fans on this coaching staff. I mean, you'll still hear Wes Phillips talk a lot about Cooper Kupp as a run blocker, Cooper Kupp's ability to play pretty much any receiver spot on the offense, Cooper Kupp's ability as a route runner, to kind of see the whole picture of the offense. Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips won a Super Bowl with Cooper Kupp as the MVP of that game. So there was a lot of reason to think it could happen. I think the question was always going to be, what kind of a role did Cooper Kupp want to have? Because he's not going to come in here and be the number one. Everybody knows that. I don't even know that he would come in and be the number two, given where Jordan Addison has been. I think there'd be a role for him, but roles tend to match up with contract value. And if you're not the number one receiver, you're not going to get paid like the number one receiver. So it kind of depended on what he wanted for this point of his career. And I didn't realize until a few minutes ago that he's from the Seattle area. So this is a bit of a homecoming for him as well. I think that certainly, for a lot of guys at the end of their careers, especially like him, where he's won a Super Bowl, the idea of playing for your hometown team has a certain amount of appeal. So I think that won out here. But the question of whether he was going to end up here, I think there was always, for as much interest as there is in him, I think it was always this question of, was he going to have the type of role in Minnesota that he'd had in the past and probably still wants to have in the future?
3 years, and he got 3 years, $45 million, according to Schefter. So he ended up getting a good piece of, pretty good amount of money. And maybe the Vikings had limits about how far they were willing to go there, too. We had Rondell Moore in, I think, today to visit kind of the scat back wide receiver. Very good college player, highly regarded, I think, coming out. He's had I think his season ended last year with a knee injury. What do we think the chances are that we're interested in actually signing him? What do you think?
I think they're interested. I mean, I think bringing him in for a visit at this stage of it is a pretty good indicator of that. They need some depth at that position. I do think having another option there is a good idea. You kind of saw Jalen Naylor be streaky last year, so having somebody else would be a good option. Jordan Addison, there's still a possibility of a suspension at the beginning of this year. And I think Rondell Moore brings a different element to that receiving room if they get him than they've had in the past. I mean, people that remember him in college, he had some big days against the Gophers when he was playing for Purdue, and the Vikings saw it a few years back. I think his first year in Arizona was when the Vikings went out there for that week 2 game in Mike Zimmer's last year, and he had a long touchdown in that game. So he's the kind of guy that if you get the ball in his hands and he's healthy, he's explosive. He can turn quickly. He's got good top end speed. It's not a type of receiver that they've had in quite that fashion. I mean, they have guys that can run. Certainly Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison can run, but the level of shiftiness, a guy that is more of a quick game option, I think especially if you're going to have J.J. McCarthy as the quarterback, that type of a receiver makes some sense as a little bit of that outlet, a little bit of that safety valve that you think can still make some things happen. So we'll see if it gets done, but I think the interest is real, and I think there's a lot of good reason to add a guy like that to the offense if, in fact, they do it.
You mentioned that also I think this was yesterday, the Vikings added another tackle. Justin, is it pronounced School? I don't even know how to pronounce the name. Made 17 starts in 6 seasons. And you lay out he could provide some depth at tackle. And you brought up a name I hadn't really thought about. Christian Darrisaw, obviously coming off ACL, torn ACL. Do we know where he is, whether his rehab is going exactly as expected? We obviously always concentrate on the quarterback, but what do we know, if anything, about Darrisaw's recovery?
I think the signs to this point have been pretty good. I mean, I heard about this a little bit at the Combine. I think there's a reasonable amount of optimism with him, but, when he gets hurt, it's late October, it was that Rams game, so you're probably talking about the optimistic end of it would be the start of training camp. He's probably not going to be an active participant on the field in the offseason stuff. And even the beginning of training camp is 9 months out from when he got hurt. So that's still, pretty early on in the process. I would think they would want to have him ready for week 1, but, especially with an offensive lineman that you're bearing a lot of weight on your knee joints and all of those kinds of things, I think there's going to be reason to be cautious with it and make sure that he's completely recovered, because obviously they have paid him to be one of the best left tackles in the league. He is, when he's healthy, I think he is one of those types of players, and they want to be able to have him kind of be that set it and forget it type where he can take on a team's best pass rusher without a tight end chipping or without a running back helping. They want to kind of have him play a lot of those downs where you can handle it and you're not getting any assistance in the process, and you have to have him healthy to do that. So bringing in another guy to have some depth, I think, is something that made a lot of sense. And with Justin Scholl, I think a lot of it is he's had some starting experience. He can be the swing tackle if you need him to be once Darrisaw is healthy, but it makes sense to have a short-term option that has done it at least a little bit. I mean, Walter Rouse could be the other guy in that mix, but having somebody that started at least a few games in the NFL, I think is a solid pickup, just to kind of one of those second-level needs that was certainly there, and one of those things that probably could become a little more prominent if Darrisaw takes a little longer to come back.
Do we know for a fact that the Vikings made a legitimate offer to try to keep Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I believe they did. I mean, I think they made an offer, but were they going to get to the point where the Colts did? What did he end up at? 14 million?
Yeah, $14 million plus like incentives. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it's reasonable that those offers are pretty close together. I think from what I've heard, the offers were competitive. It's the question of how likely is that job to turn into a full-time starting position. And I think he looked at it and said, my opportunity to compete with Anthony Richardson may be more likely that I win out than my opportunity to compete with J.J. McCarthy, because Anthony Richardson obviously gets benched last year. There's, I think, questions about his future in Indianapolis more so than there would be any of those types of questions about J.J. McCarthy. I think if J.J. McCarthy is healthy and ready, they're going to be pretty excited to put him on the field. So Daniel Jones, I think, looked at some of this and said, you know what, I probably have a better chance to play consistently, to put up decent numbers, and maybe get myself out on the market to get a long-term deal a la Sam Darnold in Indianapolis. And there's a gamble to that because the personnel is better in Minnesota, especially now that they have 40% of the Colts offensive line, I guess. But I think the idea of playing time, the idea of I can put up numbers, he looked at the two things and said, my chances of that happening in Indianapolis may just be better because I have a better chance to be on the field.
All right, let's get to the Rodgers part, which half our audience loves. And we need a break.
After the break.
You're right. I apologize. We got to get caught up, and I would get what you can tell us, if anything, about the ongoing Aaron Rodgers soap opera. Part 2 with Ben Goessling, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. More of him. Part 2 with Ben Goessling, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. The cliffhanger was the Aaron Rodgers story, and it appears from a media standpoint there's a split. There are a number of reporters, both local and national, who say, I think it's unlikely that A-Rod is going to end up here, but I am bothered enough by the fact that the people who I trust flat out won't say to me there's not any consideration going on here, so I have to keep the door open until they do. And then there's a couple people like Schefter nationally who's dismissing all of it, saying, come on, there's nothing to it. I'm not going to report it until I really think there's an actual possibility that the Vikings are playing footsie, or at least considering moving forward, and dramatically changing the plan. Where are you in the middle of this?
Well, I would put myself probably more in the first group, because I have heard enough of it this week where I think the way I would characterize it is there's at least enough interest to say, let's talk about this. And I compared it, I think, on our podcast today, of if a company calls you for a job interview and you're like, well, I don't really know that I'm going to take this job. I don't know if the fit is going to be there, but yeah, I'll at least take the meeting. I'll take the interview and see where we're at on things. That's how I would classify it, because I think there's intrigue from Aaron Rodgers, at least from what I hear, in working with Kevin O'Connell. And I think there is enough interest in, what he has been in his career, and whether he's going to be that or not anymore is another question. But I think there's at least enough to say, let's see what could possibly happen here. I don't know that it will get to the point where anything happens. Everybody that I've talked to about it, I think, is still skeptical that we get to the point where it gets done, but nobody has dismissed it outright. And I think there's enough possibility that they could get together and talk. What that means ultimately, I think, is a different question, because
Sure.
you have to be settled on what it means for the locker room, what it means for J.J. McCarthy, how long of a commitment you're making, what kind of a financial commitment you're making. Are you promising him the starting job? Is he going to want to be in a competition? What are you saying about his extracurricular stuff in terms of Pat McAfee or not coming to OTAs and minicamp? And there's so many things that I think could be possible deal breakers if not everybody's on the same page, that it may not happen. And he may say, I'm going to go somewhere else where I don't have to even think about not being the starter. But I think there's at least enough intrigue to say, let's at least stop and have a conversation about it, whatever that looks like. So, I guess I'm still not thinking that it's going to happen, but there's enough crumbs there that make me think I won't dismiss it outright at this point.
651 guy writes, Goessling was commenting on the age of the free agent sign this morning. Doesn't this suggest, quote, win now and maybe Aaron Rodgers?
Well, yeah, you could cut it that way. I think there is a level of players that are coming in here. I mean, guys in their 30s and guys that have played quite a bit. We've seen Brian Flores probably have a little bit of a preference for older players that may come into that. But yes, I think there is certainly the window is open. Now, you could say that's a window open to put Aaron Rodgers in there, or you could say the window is open
regardless,
because
yeah,
if we have a cheap quarterback, we can spend a lot of this money in other places. So I think there's all of those things that can be calculated with it. But yes, if they were sitting there and saying, we've got the team right now, and if we think Aaron Rodgers comes in and gives us a better chance to go all the way for this 1 year than J.J. McCarthy does, maybe you do it. They're very high on McCarthy, and I think they're optimistic about where he's at physically too. So it will be intriguing, and what the timetable looks like for Rodgers, I don't know. Is he going to move things along so that the team can figure that out? I think that's also a question. It's just a unique situation in terms of you don't get a guy very often with his resume that becomes a free agent, and the reasons that he is a free agent are also part of the thing that would give you pause.
Yeah, that's it. That's what makes it tough.
It's certainly very intriguing.
Well, and I would assume one thing we could surmise at this point is that Rodgers is waiting on the Vikings more than the other way around. That it's very likely Rodgers knows he could go to New York or Pittsburgh. Now, they may have a deadline on when they say, we got to move to plan B if we can't wait here for you forever. But I think, is it not a logical assumption to say if you're Rodgers, you're waiting and hoping that those Vikings discussions, whatever they are, no matter how informal they are, get to a place where they go, the more we think about this, that's what he's waiting on, the possibility that they actually might be willing to make a concrete offer. Because I got to believe he would view this as easily the most attractive of the three options, if indeed this ends up being an option.
Yeah, for sure. It would be the most attractive option. I mean, I think you would look at everything from the coaching to the facilities to the people he'd be playing with. Probably the best receiver he's ever played with the exception of Devontae Adams, I would think. And maybe not even the exception of Devontae Adams, maybe the best outright. I think there's a strong case to be made for that. So, yes, this would be the best situation he could find himself in. So, yeah, I would think it's more that he's waiting to see what they want to do more than them saying, well, you need to let us know if you're interested in us. I mean, I think the Vikings would be the preferable option for him. They have to decide what they're going to do. And there may be a little bit of a timeline for them only in the sense that they do want to get another veteran in here. And they can't have everybody else sign so that there's nobody else to bring in here in the long run. And then you're stuck waiting on Rodgers and you have nobody. But I think if they were to indicate to him, we would like to talk, I would expect he would respond to that pretty quickly with, yes, let's talk, rather than, let me go on a darkness retreat and I'll get back to you in 3 weeks. I would think if they indicate legitimate interest to him, I would assume he's going to be pretty intrigued by that pretty quickly.
We appreciate the time as always, sir, and we will chat next week. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
Ben Goessling covers the Minnesota Vikings in the National Football League for the Star Tribune and joins us weekly and sometimes twice a week. We had some emergency bonus Goessling early this week as well, and a busy free agency week. I think, wildly successful free agent week for your Minnesota Vikings, as much as you can call before any of these guys have played. But we go back to these guys aren't just second level. They haven't been second level players where you're just kind of hoping they can get a little better or emerge. These guys have been good. They have been established starters, and I think they're, even with the age issue, they've still got some football left in them for sure. Top of the hour pause, 1/2 hour yet to go on today's Bumper to Bumper program. Don't go. Man. Two words, writes 507 guy. Marcus Mariota. Not Naz Reid. Marcus Mariota. He's the one the coaches want. Okay. It's possible, I guess.
Wouldn't that have been done
but
already?
I think, didn't he?
Didn't he just sign somewhere?
I thought he just re-upped in Washington, didn't he? We'll double check. I thought I read a piece basically saying, praising Washington keeping coaches together.
The grass isn't always greener, and he returns to the Commanders.
Yeah, so I don't think 507 guy, that's going to work. But that's he represents an entirely different question, though, obviously, right? That's they wouldn't be bringing him in, I don't think, because they think he had visions to compete with and perhaps even take the job from J.J. McCarthy. I don't think that would be the case. At least I'd be surprised if it was. Big Ten men's basketball action. Bozich had told us, watch out for Maryland. They're looking the part, man. They are up on Illinois, the game that Tim Connelly is at, our 5 o'clock guest, 36-15 with 8 minutes to go in the first half in Indianapolis. This is the third of 4 games today. I think Purdue, Michigan wrap things up tonight. But Maryland is they're the number 2 seed. They have a record of 24-7. I haven't paid that much attention to them, but they obviously seem to have something going.
They surged the last month or so.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't seen a ton of them either. Brad Underwood just did an interview with Andy Katz, after one of the media timeouts, and I could tell it wasn't going well, or that Brad, I didn't know what the score was at that point, but he basically, I don't know what Andy asked him, but he points up at the scoreboard. He's like, a couple dumb turnovers to start, and we haven't guarded them. You're down 19. That's what happens. So we got to play.
Yeah.
He's the best.
He is. He's good. Illinois is though they're obviously both these teams are in the tournament as well. Any new rumors about? We started with Gopher conversation, men's basketball. The fact that Iowa dismissed the winningest coach in Iowa basketball history, Franz Red Face.
297 wins there.
15 years.
Yes,
I think it was 15.
Yep.
So now they have an opening. Minnesota has an opening. Indiana still has an opening. I think that's it in the Big Ten right now.
It is.
Unless there's going to be anybody else dismissed. I don't think there's any likely prospects there.
Maybe Chris Collins goes to Virginia or Indiana or somewhere like that, like your buddy Bozich suggested.
Well, Collins is an interesting one because I don't know how he feels about, do you get tired of all the battles there? Or do you kind of? He could coach there the rest of his life if he wants to.
Probably,
right? Realistically,
probably. So
then you're back to do I want a bigger stage? Do I care? I go, I'm in the Big Ten. I live right off the lake. It's not bad here, Chicago, Illinois.
And he was a Chicago kid.
Yeah, I'll just hang with this whole thing. I don't know, but that name has come up, and we've got. The front runner we think is Nico Medved, correct? Colorado State.
Yes.
But we don't know it. There's a lot of steam in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that by the time I'm on the air Sunday or by the time we're on the air Monday, there will be an announcement? Do you think it's going to be that fast?
I don't think it'll be that fast.
Okay.
Because I think the conference tournaments are just wrapping up. Selection Sunday is Sunday.
He's on and your guy's on the committee, so he's got to be a little bit distracted, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be that fast.
Okay.
And let's say Colorado State, they're on the bubble right now for the NCAA tournament. They made the tournament last year.
Right.
Colorado State actually ended Tony Bennett's career last year. They beat Virginia in the play-in game. So I'm thinking if it is Nico and his team makes the tournament.
Yeah, that's true too.
And if they don't, they're probably playing some type of postseason tournament. So is there some delay there? I'm not sure. So, and if it's Drake coach, like they're, Missouri Valley as well, like they're right now probably in the mix. So I don't think it'll be that fast. I think more stuff I'd say maybe a week from Monday would be more likely.
I, once upon a time, fell in love with a Loyola head coach named Porter Moser.
Yeah.
And he became like the new Dart. Right? The Loyola story was tremendous, right?
It was.
That was
Sister
just
Jean's
unbelievable.
Still alive,
she is. It's unbelievable.
She's like 112.
She's going to outlive. Well, yeah, she already has. I guess I was going to say Virginia McCaskey, but Virginia McCaskey did finally die. But he is now at Oklahoma. I'd kind of lost track of him, right?
Yep.
Of him.
Yep.
I don't know how is he done there because on the Start Tribune list, his name is up there, and I can't tell if it's up there just because we're going to put out some names, or because there's some juice to indicate that the AD here, Mr. Coyle, or some other people might have some interest in him. I've lost track of. He's like 56, I think, too, right? Like 56 years old.
Yeah, probably. I'm going to see what his contract is.
And then there's always the buyout, right?
Yeah, see how much money he's making.
This indicates buyout in the Star Tribune story of $8.3 million.
Yeah,
that's pretty high, right? We're not doing that. Yeah.
No, we're not paying that.
Well, I would say if we would consider doing that, it has to be for a star, right? A current star to even consider it.
Yes.
And I don't even know if that would matter. I don't know if people are ambitious enough here. I don't even know because, the comments from, it was either the Q&A or the presser today, the online presser, somewhere, there were comments from Coyle that worried me a little bit. The old, you got to worry about balancing the budget and all this stuff.
It was in the Q&A and it was today.
Both of them, okay.
Yeah.
And that worries me because it's almost like, I got to be on my P's and Q's here, and we're not going to spend $1 more than we have to spend. It's like, but that's sort of what got you here. And then, so do you want to do this again in 3-4 years? Do you want to just keep doing this? I don't know what the way is out of the box. Has anybody else around the U that you are in contact with, have they commented or are they at all surprised at the degree to which, at least for now, Coyle seems to be doubling down on the notion that we ain't going down the Williams Arena is dead deal. We're just not doing it. I'm not making a big deal of that. I'm not ready to do it. Does that surprise anybody? Because he's been as we talked about yesterday, he seems almost militant about don't make this about the arena because nothing's going to change with the arena.
Yeah, I haven't been on campus this week, I don't think. Yeah, I guess I was there on Tuesday for, I guess, the last Ben Johnson radio show, now that we mention it.
Yeah.
I'll be there a little bit next week, I would imagine. I haven't talked to many people around there in the last couple of days, but I'll say from my own reaction to that has been extremely surprising that he's been that forceful about it, because we already know that they've hired an engineering firm to at least take a look at the building to see what's possible in terms of renovations. We also know that building a new arena is a possibility, that they've looked into that as well. Like, that's all public record. So, and not that anything was imminent, like they were going to roll out something next week, but it surprised me to hear that this week, that he was that forceful in saying, we have a historic venue. So that almost leads me to believe, did they get something back from the engineer? And they're saying,
that wasn't very,
or we're just going to renovate and we're just going to do something.
Right.
And we're not going to build a new arena. And he also talked about, I think, figuring out the revenue sharing piece in the Q&A with Marcus. Like, they're trying to figure all of this money out first before then they start looking for money for Williams Arena or the new arena or whatever it is. But that surprised me.
Is your guy PJ going to get his nose out of joint if he doesn't like the proportion? Because this is basically football and basketball money, right? But who gets what? Is he going to be mad if he doesn't feel like he's getting enough? Or do you think he's prepared for the number that seems to be fairly ambitious for the basketball?
Yeah.
That it's all going to work out for everybody?
I mean, given that I'm sure PJ's been in every revenue sharing meeting that they've had, they wouldn't have settled. They wouldn't have done that without some of PJ's blessing, if that makes sense.
It does.
Like, I think they're trying to give PJ every single thing that they can possibly give him, like most schools are for football, because that does drive the engine financially for everybody. So the money comes back to you if you have a successful football program. So I think the number that's been floated is about 70% for football.
Right.
And then it's men's and women's basketball, hockey, and volleyball. Men's hockey and volleyball are getting the rest of it. So I'm guessing they wouldn't have settled on that 70% if it wasn't vetted with the head football coach first, who I think is hanging out in Vegas, by the way, going to the Mountain West tournament.
Is that right?
I saw
hanging out with Richard.
I think. Well, I saw Mrs. Fleck in a picture with Mrs. Patino at the game yesterday.
Huh.
So I don't know if PJ's there too. They love Vegas. It's not Indy, but it's nice.
Maybe Richard wants to come back here.
Well, I was just texting with somebody about. What about Richard to Iowa?
It's an interesting thought.
What if Iowa strikes out on the two guys from Iowa?
How about that?
How far away do you? How far down the list do you go?
Delicious to have him back in the conference.
Well, and then what I was saying is, then he should just recruit the bleep out of Minnesota kids. Like, he should just be here.
That'd be too good.
Constantly, and every Lakeville North kid is now going to
Forget
Iowa.
Wisconsin.
They're not going to Wisconsin anymore. They're going down to Iowa. That's
City.
the Aaron Rodgers story.
That'd be a good one.
Is Patino gets the Iowa job, and all of a sudden is a fixture in Minnesota gyms, charming the moms and dads of every Minnesota recruit.
That'd be
from here to Duluth.
I hope you're right. I hope you're onto something there. That would be absolutely
I'd love it.
Delicious. In fact, we should, well, they're going to be in the tournament, right?
Yes.
We should try to get him on.
We will.
At some point. We did that. Was it last year around? I don't know.
After he won the Mountain West tournament, you had him on sermons the next day.
We should try to have him on again. That was fun, and it's time to catch up anyway. And then he can get a couple more cheap shots in about not being appreciated here.
That's right.
It all works out. Everybody wins. We get a good interview. He gets to,
he gets to peacock.
Yeah, exactly.
His dad is on fire with the media, with everything. He just had a joke about one of his players is taking IVs for Ramadan, because he can't eat or drink.
Right.
And I retweeted it because it's just classic. And he said, I asked the trainers if they could put anything in the IV that would help his defense. And of course, everybody laughs.
They all love it. Now he's Shecky Green.
Rick Pitino, he's just living the dream in the Big Apple.
He can do no wrong. That's what winning does. That's the way we operate. We'll come back, wrap things up next.
Show Wrap brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washer since 1975.
It's the bumper-to-bumper Show Wrap.
Well, lots of go for men's basketball coaching speculation early in the show, late in the show as well, plus a cavalcade of outstanding guests that started with Lavelle filing a live report from Fort Myers, Florida, where he revealed to us, he joined about 4 o'clock, and revealed to us that he's so tuckered from his spring training experiences that now he's going to, at the back end, take 4 days off.
It's a nice homage to the late, great John Feinstein, who had to go to bed for 3 days after he finished a book.
After he finished a book. Very similar. In any case, Laval between 4 and 4:30. A nice conversation with Tim Connelly, who is scouting, doing what he does this time of year, Big Ten tournament play in Indianapolis, Indiana. We talked a lot about the Wolves' resurgence. We chided him for suddenly making himself available after a 5-game winning streak, and even talked trade rumors and a lot of good stuff, I think, on why and how this team is emerging a little bit from the muck, specifically as it pertains to Julius Randle especially. And he also, I thought, candidly said, yeah, I was worried before the trade deadline, and he wouldn't get specific about how close the Wolves got. He made it sound like, well, not so close, but that's all semantics. But he did say, given the record the team had at that point, that he was willing to listen and willing to look around. And he also said on the second apron stuff, making stuff tough, what people, he said, forget is it's not just tough on our end in terms of our second apron. He said a lot of the ideas meant we're going to trigger other teams getting into the second apron, and that also further complicates the ability to make big blockbuster deals before the deadline.
I think there were a lot of unintended consequences with this second apron.
Yeah, for sure.
And middle-tier guys aren't getting paid now because of that.
That's also true. Ben Goessling joined 5:30 to 6, and we talked free agency. We talked about also his own view on the Aaron Rodgers situation. He seems pretty firmly in the camp that believes they're talking, but he will be very surprised if ultimately the Vikings pull the trigger. If indeed this is all about Rodgers waiting for the Vikings, I got to believe the Vikings are going to want to put an end to it pretty soon, right? One way or the other. Either we're going to actually pursue this, or we're done with this. Let's move on with the rest of our lives. Let's get a backup quarterback in here, and let's just end this stuff. That would be my feel, but who's to say? I don't know. But I think there's every reason to believe that Rodgers is. A lot of people think this is the classic Rodgers drama queen or drama king situation. I think it's more likely right now. He never minds that, but I think it's more likely. Well, I don't want to pull the trigger if there's any even remote chance that they have a come to Jesus moment at TCO and say, yeah, let's try this, right? Because the Vikings would obviously represent by far his best option, and maybe he loves the quarterback whisperer. I don't know. Very, very difficult to say. Speaking of the Wolves, don't forget tonight, right on the flagship.
Yep.
They're back home. They're taking on the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic. Did we come in the same? No, we came in the year after they did, didn't we?
Yes.
We came in the second year with, was it Charlotte?
I think Charlotte. It was Heat and Orlando the year before.
I think you're right about that. I never get that right. But it's Orlando tonight. A good opportunity for the fans to celebrate the resurgence of this club. Let's see if they can handle a little bit of prosperity, because they're starting to get stroked again a little bit. They're starting to get positivity their way, and part of the job is to not fall for it. Just go out and continue to pursue the game the way you have been pursuing it the last several weeks.
Friday night, 70 degrees. First Ave, blocky. Everything's hopping right now. Target Center should be a madhouse tonight.
And slush and 34 tomorrow afternoon. You can't make it up. Back with the sermons on Sunday morning at 9. We will talk then.